Performance sport is difficult. It's very hard, I think, to just stop something that you've done your whole life.
The biggest challenges you are facing with the business right now?
The storm that hit the facility in 2023.
Scott, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming on. Just anyone that's clicked on this video, could you explain who you are and what your business is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Scott Clayton. I am the co-founder of Island Padel, a paddle facility in Jersey. And yeah, that's who I am.
And did you always want to own your own business, and was it always in sport?
Yeah, I think so. So my background's obviously in tennis, and when I was playing tennis, as I was getting to like kind of the later stages of my career, it was very much a situation of what will I do next, and I think a lot of athletes go through that process. And it's a tough process to go through because ultimately you're quite worried about the future, and it's something that you've like always known. Like we always used to say when we were in tennis, kind of like you retire twice. You know, you retire from your life as a tennis player or as an athlete if you're in a different sport, and then obviously you're trying to set up this whole new life after. Because quite often what happens is people will, sacrifice education and things like that, so then they don't have the qualifications necessarily to go into different things. So essentially, yes, I was always interested in business. I wasn't the most academic person at school, I wouldn't say. I was okay. I was like middle of the ground, I guess. But one subject that I always did like to go to for my GCSEs was business studies. And so I really liked learning about that kind of thing. And so I knew when I stopped playing tennis that I didn't want to go into coaching. But I knew I wanted to go into business, but obviously then it's like, what do I do, you know? And ultimately I wanted to end up back in Jersey as well because, I left here when I was 11, but I absolutely love the island. Everything I've had from it, my childhood and everything. So I wanted to be back here. But obviously, as you know, in Jersey, I think you're quite restricted in terms of what you can do as well. So that was always quite hard. So right place, right time. And very fortunate with the people that I'm working with and doing it with,
And did you leave Jersey because of tennis?
Yeah, so I left at 11. So I was at De La Salle school over here. And then I went to a school called Millfield on a tennis scholarship when I was 11. That was purely to pursue tennis. Because I think what you find in kind of professional sport on the island especially is it gets to a point where you have to travel. There's just no getting around from that, like people over here now are doing amazing things with facilities and we've got some great personnel on the island who can help nurture talent, but ultimately when it comes to performance sport you need to be able to compete, and unfortunately there's just that restriction here in Jersey because of population size, etc. So it got to a stage really for myself and my parents where I was traveling to the UK almost like every weekend anyway to play. So it made more sense to be based there. But it was a way that I could keep up my education on top of. And then I left school at 16 after my GCSEs. And that's when then I really kind of pursued into kind of like professional tennis.
And who inspired you to be where you are today, do you think? Whether that's like a family member or perhaps someone in sport?
It's a difficult one. I think definitely my parents. I think I look at my dad a bit. Like my dad runs his own business in the finance sector over here, and so I think I've always quite probably subconsciously looked at that, and my parents ultimately were the ones that they played club tennis, so naturally I fell into tennis because of them. But then I think kind of as I was on the journey of tennis, you look up to professionals doing it and maybe people around you, and I think that's where I also got really lucky is that I was in every environment that I was in, whether that was in Jersey initially, then at boarding school at Millfield, or then when I was full-time, I trained in Bath. All those training environments, I would say, were kind of maybe at like their peak you know, the caliber of players we had at the time in all those areas, the coaches, the vibe. So there was definitely luck along the way as well, you know, because I think if I was in different environments at different times, things may not have happened like they did for me. And very much the case with paddle now, which I'm sure we'll get onto. But I think ultimately, yeah, probably my parents. I look up to and I still do look up to my parents a lot, and I think ultimately that's where this whole thing has come from. Yeah.
And then moving on to your business, Island Padel. What inspired you to start Island Padel? How did you first come across the idea? Because obviously you were in tennis.
Yeah, so I moved back to the island. Well, I was playing tennis in 2020, obviously just pre-pandemic, and I was in Canada. And I was at a bit of a crossroads, I would say. Not that many people knew that. Probably like my now wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, and my parents and my coach and stuff. As I said, especially when you don't have something to fall into. So I was very much at a crossroads, as I say, and then COVID happened. I was in Canada competing at the time in high-level competition, lost in the semi-finals, and then I came back to Ireland for my dad's birthday, just for the weekend. Had no real intention to be here for a long period of time. COVID obviously escalated, tournaments were cancelled, etc., etc., etc. So really, that kind of then meant that I was on Ireland, and I kind of had to start making some form of money because you know I was at this time 26, and you know I was staying with my parents whilst my wife was in, well, my now wife was in London. She's a teacher, and so I started doing some tennis coaching privately, etc., etc. And then what happened is I'd played paddle when a lot of the time we would be at tennis tournaments in Europe, and there would be paddle courts at facilities or close by, and we would play paddle to kind of unwind. So I'd played paddle very socially, didn't know much about it, etc. And then I met through a friend. I met Morgan, who is co-founder with me of Island Padel, and we got talking, and we kind of like just clicked. I think there was a real sort of symbiotic kind of mindset and ethos in terms of what we wanted to achieve and what could be done. And again, really like fortunate, right place, right time. You know, I owe everything to Morgan as well. Like he's really mentored me and taught me on this journey to make me kind of the business person I am today in these kind of what are we 20 yeah, so four years at the moment. So we had like long conversations about what was possible, looked at various different options. Came to the conclusion of where we're based now in St. Clements, by far the best facility for us, and the ethos that they have as well was very much aligned with what we wanted to do. So it was a perfect place. So kind of that's how it all kind of really came about. And yeah, as I say, I think looking back at it, because you don't really, you know, you're in the process and you just keep going. I think looking back at it, very fortunate timing, and you know, it's worked really, really well.
And why Jersey, do you think? Why not Guernsey or somewhere like that?
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, because I'm from here, I really wanted to come back here. I knew that, you know, eventually we were going to be looking to have kids, which we now have one son, and although I left at a very early age, you know, based on my childhood up until the age of 11, it was incredible. And I think we lived in London for a long time, which was nice, but then finally you have a bit of enough of that, like the busy, hectic kind of frantic things that cities naturally are. So yeah, so I just wanted to be back in Jersey, and then so that was always my first point of call. However, I did have conversations with my wife and said, you know, if I don't get a job here, I'm going to need to go back to the UK. As I said, she's a teacher, so she's a bit more flexible with where she can work. So I had loads of ideas about kind of maybe going into the LTA, which is the governing body for tennis, and working in the offices there and trying to help them from like that business side, so they then get involved in that business side. Also with the Association Tennis Professionals, the ATP, there's like couple of my friends had gone into that. Ultimately, I didn't really know what I was going to do, and the universe helped me. And I'm big, like Morgan, as I said, like we speak a lot, and like he's a big believer in that, and I have become like a big believer in those kind of things. So right place, right time, and then really, it was a decision. Which, when I look back on, often you don't give yourself a lot of credit, like one doesn't, but I think actually looking back, I've been quite sensible and made good decisions. So as an example, when I played tennis, it's like that thing, I don't know if you've seen on Monday Night Football, like Gary Neville always says, like no one wants to grow up and become a right back, So in tennis, it's the same. No one grows up and wants to become a doubles player, but basically my singles ranking wasn't where I wanted it, and my doubles ranking was, and I saw a future in doubles, and I saw an opportunity to make a living in doubles. So at a very young, or what was considered a very young age, at about 21, I made that decision that I was about 680 in the world in the time in singles, and about 100 or 250 in the world in doubles at the time, and I said, no, okay, I'm going to stop singles now, because I saw that maybe in a few years' time, that process was going to need to happen anyway. And if I wanted to carry on trying to make a career in tennis and make a living in tennis and playing places like Wimbledon, etc., it was going to be in doubles, not singles. So it was like, right, I'm going to put all my eggs into that basket now. And a very similar decision for when I decided to stop playing. COVID definitely accelerated that process for me. Which was a blessing in hindsight. Obviously I know COVID was a terrible time for a lot of people. But if I look just selfishly, personally, it was a good thing for me in the sense that it made my decision for me a little bit, which I needed. But if I look at that time, it was, okay, doubles, I could carry on going for another few years, and potentially I could, of course I could get a higher ranking, make more money, but I'm not going to do anything in the game probably that's going to mean that I'm never going to have to do anything again in my life, So it was a situation of like, this opportunity has come up. I've met Morgan. He can help with this and mentor me, and we've got a great partnership here. And ultimately it's going to happen in 4 or 5 years if it's me or someone else. So that was the decision I took at that time. So probably, was I ready to stop tennis? Yes, probably. Did I want to? Probably, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So I was kind of like hanging on a bit, I would say, for that last kind of 6 months of playing. So yeah, again, quite fortunate in that sense.
And when you talk about solo rankings and double rankings, is it, because I don't know much about tennis, do you have to just keep playing and competing to get your ranking up?
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite a difficult system, really, because basically what happens is the ranking system works on an annual basis. So let's say I played a tournament this week, and I won the tournament. Okay, the same week, the following year, the points that I gained from this year will drop off my point system. So every year you're having to defend what you've done the year before or get better. But where it gets quite difficult is that obviously the higher the tournament, the more ranking points are on offer. So you need to try to break through. But it's very tough to break through because the tournaments that you're trying to break through from aren't tournaments that are giving you large ranking points. Okay, so it becomes quite a tough cycle to like, and that's where you have to like be quite selfish and take opportunities when they come, etc. So essentially the ranking system, I was playing singles and I had my single ranking, but then in doubles what happens is if I was playing with you, although we're a doubles pair, I would have an individual doubles ranking and you would have an individual doubles ranking. And then how they decide who gets into what tournament is they combine those two together. So if I was number 1 in the world and you were number 2 in the world, we would be 3. Okay, so, and that's how it works basically. So although you're working as a team, there's still that kind of thing that you've got an individual part of it. So it's quite a weird setup.
And do you have the same partner for the tournament, or is it different tournament?
It's up to you basically. So again, looking back at my career, I had the same partner for a very long time, one of my best friends, a guy called Johnny O'Mara from Scotland. And, we had a great time. We were traveling the world together. We were playing tennis. It was amazing. And when that relationship broke down, not the relationship, we were still very good friends, but when the partnership broke down, and we decided that it would be best to kind of try another things like a marriage, is then that is when I maybe started to struggle a bit more, because traveling is tough anyway. We were traveling about 35, 36 weeks a year. So like living in each other's pockets really. And then when you're doing that with people that maybe you're not as friendly with, not that you don't not like them, but you don't know them as well, naturally it becomes harder. So the lifestyle becomes even harder than it already was. So that's where, again, if I look back, probably like my best times, my peak times, or when I played with him. But then after that relationship, it wasn't as good for me, because I just didn't enjoy it as much, and whatever you do, I really am a big believer is that like you're going to succeed if you enjoy doing what you do, and I appreciate you can't enjoy everything you do in every little sector, but if you can enjoy the majority, then you're doing well, I think.
Okay. And you think the pandemic helped your journey as well?
I think it helped the journey in the sense that it just expedited the decision to stop playing, because I think I probably would have been stuck in emotions of just going to each tournament, making a quarterfinal, making a semi-final, which was still respectable. But again, ultimately, what the pandemic did is like it kind of gave me a bit of a slap in the face and said, right, what are you going to do if you stop? And so I had kind of a 6-7 month period because the tournaments were cancelled or they were extremely hard to get to really consider that. And then that's when, I met Morgan, and then it kind of just escalated from there.
And then another question, as like athletes, do you have like conversations about what you're going to do after? Because obviously everyone needs to stop the sport and then do something after. Do you have them conversations?
Yeah, of course. I think, again, it's more of like, so as I said, Johnny is one of my best friends. So it was more of a friendly conversation there about like kind of where we see ourselves in the future, what we want to be doing, etc. So you do. But then at the same time, sport, it's quite a ruthless thing, performance sport. It's a bit different in that sense because Johnny was a friend and I was playing doubles with him, but like you wouldn't necessarily speak to other athletes about that because it could be seen as like you like showing signs of weakness maybe, or because that you're thinking about kind of what's to come, whereas as an athlete you're always taught to like stay in the present and do what you're doing and things like that. So I would say that probably we didn't talk too much about those types of things. I probably spoke to Johnny more than anyone about it because he was a friend, and we were on the same page really. We both saw ourselves starting families back in our hometowns. He's back in Scotland now as an example. So yeah, we were just very similar people, which made the partnership enjoyable but also successful.
And then another question, in the early stages of the business, how did you draw people in? Like what marketing techniques did you use when you started Island Padel?
Yeah, it's a weird one because paddle was so immature. Like no one really knew what it was. I remember like going to places like to get my hair cut and they would ask me what I did for a living. And I would say, do you know paddle? Like no one knew, and like then you're having to describe it and things like that. So we obviously did like natural like pushes, local media, social media, but kind of why we set, or one of the reasons we set Island Padel up, and what the ethos is of Island Padel is like ultimately it's all about the community, and what we wanted to do was have a world-class facility. So spend a lot of money on the facility, make it amazing, the best of the best surfaces, everything like top draw, but make it accessible. Because I think ultimately what happens, not just in Jersey but globally, is great facilities often come with membership and like increased costs. So it's very much sort of like champagne taste, champagne money. But what we wanted to do was have champagne taste and more like beer money. because it was accessible. And ultimately, I think if you look at the product as a whole of paddle, forgetting island paddle, that is what the sport is. The accessibility of paddle is like nothing I've seen before from a racket sport. We see people come through the door every day that have never played racket sports in their life, and within 5-10 minutes they're having a rally, they're having fun. So really, it was to give the community accessibility to a world-class facility, but also it was to have people enjoy the sport of paddle, because if you think of it, it's a complete barrier to entry as well. Because if you've never played paddle and I say to you, that's fine, you can come and play, but before you walk in the gate, you have to spend £500 membership. Okay. You wouldn't do it. No. So it was very much making it accessible for us, but also actually for the community, because that's what it is, and that will never change. Because that's ultimately what we want. We don't care of any social standing. It's whoever comes down is made to feel welcome and ultimately at home. Yeah.
And then you mentioned social media. Do you think that played an important role in the growth of the business? Or not so much?
I would say in the early stages, not loads. I think if I'm honest, like, although I'm relatively young, I don't know too much about social media. I'm not like great at it. And I'm sure Morgan wouldn't mind me saying that he's even worse. He is older than me. But I think as we've progressed, we've had help with that. And we did have some help in the beginning as well. But then we were kind of like left out, we decided that because obviously we didn't have the money to, because we were starting everything out. And I think that, but now I would say we've got some help, and I think our social media is much better than what it was. So I think now it's really good and it's engaging. I think at the start, yes, we used it, but we probably didn't maximize what we could get from it. It was very much just sort of like posting things and, so I think it helped a bit. But again, I think it was more about, for us, what the most important thing was creating that vibe, which I just mentioned about people being able to come down, feel at home, feel like, because then naturally in Jersey, word spreads and people say, oh, it's amazing and you must go. And we offered free sessions to get people like into it, etc., which worked really well. So yeah, I think they were kind of the main things.
And then another question: where do you see the sport as well as Island Paddle going in the next 5 years?
I think the sport's growing exponentially globally. If you look at various market trends across the world, you can see the numbers, and a lot more people are playing paddle as it's becoming more available. I think also as people are understanding actually what it is, and unlike other racket sports, I think people are willing to give it a go. And then, like I always say to people, try twice, and I'm sure like there's like a 95% of people will come back and play. So I think it will continue to grow, but I do think there'll be a saturation point. I do think that if you look, there's been really kind of public articles in places like Sweden. Now, Sweden's the second largest market for paddle globally. About 7.5% of the population play paddle actively. Spain is number one, but what happened there is kind of like everyone jumped on the bandwagon and kind of built courts, didn't build communities around them, and essentially what happened is then it started great, and then it's just had way too many courts per head. So now you're seeing very large, good facilities closing in Sweden. So I think we're far away from that in the UK at the moment. But I also sit on a board with the governing body where commercial operators meet, and I know there's numerous planning applications across the UK in at the moment. So it's going to keep growing and growing and growing. There's no doubt about it. But to what point, I'm not sure. And I think that's the $1 million question, really.
Yeah, and have you ever thought of like expanding, maybe in Guernsey or something like that, or do you think just?
Yeah, there's been opportunity. There has been some opportunity there, whether that's in Jersey or across the water, Guernsey or the UK. You know, we've had conversations with a few people. I think I wouldn't write it off the table at all. And I think if the right opportunity came up and we felt that it was the right thing to do, we would. I just think at the moment, you know, one of the great things about Island Padel, as I said, is the vibe. And when you scale a business, it's also quite tough to match that, you know. So I wouldn't write it off the table at all, but it's not happening tomorrow. Yeah.
And then I've got a few questions about your role as co-founder. The first question, what does a typical day look like as the co-founder of Island Padel?
I think the beauty of it really is it's different every day. It really is. So I will open the facility every morning. I like to go down and make sure that obviously it's looking good. So I'll get there for about 6:30, 7:15, before people come in to play. We open from 7 a.m. So that's the first thing of my day. I'll then go back and take my little one to childcare, and then I'll go back in, and then really it's kind of we've got so much going on all the time, whether that is the community outreach stuff that we do with schools and working with other charities, or we do things where we arrange games for people, leagues, etc., corporate events, corporate days. So it really is just like a complete array of activity. Where it's changed a lot is when we started, I was also doing a lot of the coaching, which I've taken a bit of a backseat from now. We've got amazing coaches. Amir, Tom, Russ and them are like all absolutely fantastic, and so they're doing the brunt of the coaching, and so it's just making sure that obviously everything is working well, and ultimately everyone is happy, whether that's coaches or customers, you know, because as I said, we want to make sure that people are, and I make a lot of coffees as well, which I really enjoy. Yeah, that's the best part of the job. Yeah.
And then another question, biggest challenges you are facing with the business right now, or challenges you faced along the way as co-founder?
I think they're both interlinked. I think it's basically the storm that hit the facility, in 2023, wasn't it? So that was terrible, really. That was a real test. My wife had just given birth 3 days before, and then overnight, obviously, the whole facility went down. So why I say they're interlinked is because, although the facility is back, there's still, of course, a recovery process from that, and so that was a really difficult time for us. It was a lot of work, a lot of uncertainty as to where the business was going to end up. And it was a real shame, actually. But I would say one of the saddest things about it, and this is where I go back to, and you hear a lot of people talk about community, and sometimes I hear them and I don't really think they mean it. But genuinely, our community is everything there. I'm very passionate about that. Good people make good facilities, and we're very fortunate that everyone that basically comes through those gates are good people, and that's why our facility, I think, is why it's doing well and it's successful. And so what I'm going to hear is that we really missed that community feel, because obviously all of a sudden you're so used to seeing people day in, day out, week in, week out, and then no one can play, so it stops, and obviously we're part of, because I play as well, so I speak to a lot of the other players. People from the paddle community were just meeting up for walks and stuff, because although they wanted to play paddle, and I think that's one of the big things, is that although paddle is the thing that brings everyone together, it's actually, a lot of it is actually the social element, I think, for people. And I think if you asked a lot of people that do play, they would answer that kind of in the same way. It's the coffees after, it's the conversation, it's so you do see a lot of that. And also the coaches see it, you know, coaches will have lessons and people will kind of like speak to them about personal things as well, and you know that is part of their role as well. I think that's what was really difficult, and as I say, we're still in like a recovery, not in terms of the facility, but in other aspects, we're still in like a recovery from that. But I mean, it's been amazing to get it back, and I think actually we really, you know, everyone says you don't know what you have until it's gone, and like I think we can cherish what we have now even more, and the support that we received over it. I mean, there's not much anyone could have done. Like, you know, people were offering to come and help clean up, but it was a huge operation with builders and everything like that. So just the fact that we've got it back now, I think is incredible. Yeah.
And then how many months did it take to actually get it back?
So we were, start of November, the storm happened. I think it was like November 1st or 2nd. Yeah. And then we opened up on 3 outdoor courts towards the end of January. Right, okay. But obviously outdoor courts in January are not ideal. Yeah. And then the full facility was rebuilt by, I think, end of May. Okay. Right. Yeah. So, you know, we've had quite like a good, just over a year now of being back to like full operation, which has been really good. But again, that was difficult because then you were managing kind of a phased reopening almost, because you had a few courts open, then you had to close some courts, then you had to build other ones, and you know, and then so it was a building site. And that's again where we saw actually how great the community is, because they were all like, they just got on with it. They didn't mind. They appreciated that it was going to be like there was going to be builders and whatever, you know. So we've been back operating now for a period of time, and it's been good. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who are wanted to follow a similar path to you, whether that's a business in any other sport?
I would say one of the big I don't want to like be like a broken record, but I really do believe that building a community is one of the biggest things. Okay. I think that when you have a product, and again, like I said, you know, we're lucky that our product is paddle, because I think it's such an amazing sport for so many different reasons. But I think ultimately that, you know, people want to feel a part of something. And I think that if you can make them feel that, and you can give passion and a vibe, and really make them feel at home and part of a big family, I think that's where things like this really, really grow. And I think that in terms of kind of advice, I would, you know, one of the best bits of advice I ever got was from a chap, which I use all the time, was from a chap who used to be a head of men's British tennis, and I was having coffee with him once, and he told me to always ask for advice, because you don't have to take it, but people love to give it. Okay, right. And essentially, it's so true, because I think when you ask for advice, it shows like your vulnerability a little bit, and you show people that you're saying to them, I don't understand it all, but I want to. Yeah. And ultimately, people will be forthcoming with advice, because it's a little bit of an ego thing for them as well, you know, to give advice to someone. And then it's up to you whether you think, oh yeah, actually that's really good and I'm going to take it, or no, maybe that doesn't work for me and nothing's going to happen of it, you know. So I really believe in that, and I use that all the time. And you know, there's some bits of advice that I've been given that have transformed how I've been able to operate today, and there's other bits of advice where I've thought, no, that's terrible, and I leave it, you know. Yeah. So like that was one of the big things for me. So I would say, following on from that is, you know, be vulnerable, show people that like you're willing to learn, and ultimately, you know, you have to be prepared to do everything. You know, again, it's a cliche, but it's not an easy journey, you know, when you're starting something. And I really believe that you have to be able to do and to see kind of every part of the business and understand it before you can get to a position where, but never be in that position. Always be prepared to do it. Do the little things because they make the biggest difference. There's no doubt about it.
And then going back to you saying having like a plan B when you're an athlete, bit of a rogue question, but do you think having that mindset is better than just going straight for, so in your case, tennis, going straight for tennis, just having a plan A? Do you think that's better, or having something to fall back on? Yeah. What do you think is better?
Personally, I've always lived my life with plan A, and just giving it everything. With tennis, I think I was very fortunate that my parents were willing to support me on that journey. One, financially, but two, also just they got that things like take time, and it's not all going to be rosy. There's going to be really tough moments, which there were. There's going to be great moments, which there were. But ultimately, I think if you've got, in my opinion, if you've got something else in your head, it's very hard to go all in. And I think if you're going to be successful in anything, you have to be all in. And whether that's in business or in sport, sport's a funny one. Like and in some respects, my mindset and my personality probably don't match that of like a high performing athlete. You have to be quite selfish, because you have to really just look after yourself, and that needs to come first, regardless of anything else, because it's all about you, and it's about what you do and what you produce, in my case, on the tennis court. So I struggled with that a little bit. I got better at that a little bit towards the end, in a nice way. I'm not a selfish person, but like as I say, you have to be a little bit. Going back to your point, is I really believe like that there shows like you have to be all in, because ultimately that needs to be the priority and that needs to come first. And if it isn't, then I think you're opening yourself for errors and not as good succession.
And then I've got a few slider questions from viewers. So the first question is, competing in a professional level such as Wimbledon requires a certain level of competitiveness. How does your work at Island Padel feed that competitive edge?
Yeah. I think ultimately, like whether it was tennis or now whether it's in business, like I wanted to do everything to the best of my ability. I think that when you're playing tennis, as I said, you have to just put all your eggs into that basket and go for it. And I think how I've been able to translate that into business now is I want Island Padel to be the best sporting facility for anyone involved, whether that's in Jersey, whether that's in the UK, because I think facilities, as mentioned earlier, they're not necessarily just of like the infrastructure. It's what is created within it, and I really believe that we do that very well. And I think that tennis is a funny one, or sport in general, because essentially everyone always told me when I was playing tennis, and you always hear these things on podcasts or speaking to people who have done it, that you are running a business when you're a tennis player, but you are the business. So you are the CEO. You are the person in the gym. You are the person on the court. You are booking your flights. You're the admin person. Do you know what I mean? So you are budgeting. So you are running a business, and ultimately that can help you in later life. And I don't think I really saw that right away. But I think as I've been on this journey for a longer period of time now, I definitely have. I think, again, if we go back to the storm, when in tennis you face a lot of adversity, it's a point scoring system where you can win more points than your opponent, but you can still lose the match. It's just how the scoring system works. So there will be times in every single scenario in every match that you face numerous amounts of adversity. And I think also the uncertainty a little bit as well. Like as I said, going back to the Storm, is when you're playing tennis, it's all about prize money. You don't know how well you're going to do. Sometimes you don't even know if you're going to get into the tournament. Like I remember traveling to Lake Como and we got to the tournament and we were 1 out and we didn't even play.
Wow.
You know, so like you have to deal with those things because there's a lot of rough, but there's also a bit of smooth, you know, and it's the smooth that you do it for. So essentially, I think in terms of competitiveness, yes, but also actually as a business, you know, I've been able to translate quite a lot of skills across, but at the same time, I've had the mentorship and the partnership with Morgan and working closely with him and his background that's really helped me maybe again expedite that process a bit quicker.
And then next question, who inspired you to take up tennis? Was it your mum and dad?
Yeah, again, I would say my parents because they played at a club level here, and I would go down to the tennis club with them, and I think again I was in a great environment with a lot of friends there, and it was more of a social thing. You know, we spent our lives down at the tennis club. And you just wanted to be down there, even if you weren't playing tennis. But that's then what really kind of drove it. And then, you know, as I've mentioned, as you get older and you start looking up to certain players and what they do and their habits. But also, actually, when I was training in Bath, what was really good is that there was a high performance like centre there, and it wasn't just tennis. There were so there was a tennis academy. You had like the netball, which I've just seen her Serena Guthrie like was part of. You had people in kind of bobsleigh, sprinters, everything. So what was great about that is that you're in an environment there where you're not just with your tennis people, you're seeing other athletes train and how they work and how they operate. Now, you will then go and carbon copy them because every sport is a bit different, so you would train differently. However, seeing top athletes at that level work and operate and how they act also kind of really helped me and inspired me. So I didn't just get inspiration, I think, from like other tennis players. I got inspiration from looking at other athletes as well and how they worked. And I was very fortunate to be in that environment, to be able to see that up close.
And is that like the vibe that you're trying to get from Island Padel, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think the big thing, you know, I was always very big on performance sport is difficult. And as I said, there's limitations in Jersey. So there's only so much you can do in Jersey. So the thing with Island Padel is let's create a hub, a community that people can come to. And if someone is there, like a young player and needs to be nurtured in a performance way, our coaches can do that. But ultimately, that's not what we're there to do. We're there to provide a community space where people can be active, have fun, socialise. And that's what, but if there is that other option, we can also help up to a point though, because as I said, going back to it is you get to a stage in performance sport and you look at all the performance athletes, let's just talk about Jersey because we're here, have ever had, they've all gone away at some point, and they've had to because ultimately they can't do it from here because they can't compete. They can train, but they can't compete. Well, my childhood dream was to play tennis and to play at Wimbledon, and obviously I was lucky to do that. I've always been sporty. I've loved sport all my life. I love football. When I went to Millfield, I was on a tennis scholarship, and I had to really prioritise tennis at that stage. I think looking back at it, it was quite a young age to prioritise one sport. It worked for me, but I did love, as I said, tennis is a very individual sport, so I did love the camaraderie that came with football and the banter and everything like that. So I still watch football a lot to this day, but I haven't played football since I was 11, properly, you know. Well, I say properly, like here in a club environment, but like with my friends. But I've always loved it and I still follow it, and you know, I'd watch football over tennis on the TV unless maybe it was like the Wimbledon final. But I think going back to that point of young children, I think it's very important for them, from kind of physical attribution point of view, to play as many sports as they can up until a point that then they really feel that they need to like push on. And I didn't have that as much, because when I went to Milford, it was very much like you're on a tennis scholarship and you're going to play tennis. And it worked for me, as I say. But I think, now me having a son, I'd like him to like play quite a lot of sports, and then see if he likes one. And if he doesn't, that's also fine, But I think, again, when you think about those things, I've got a lot of knowledge of like what's right or wrong, but that's up to him to do and see if he likes. And I'm not going to be that parent on the side of the thing. Very much give him to a coach, whether that's in tennis or paddle, and have a coffee and watch him. I do vividly remember having like a conversation with like my parents about it. And I think what ultimately got me over the line, like in my mind, like again, not that they were pushing at all, they wanted me to do whatever I wanted to do, and they were very supportive with everything I did. But I think ultimately what got me over the line is I loved the accountability of tennis, in the sense of it's on you, whereas like in a football game, like and I thought this at a very young age, like in a football game you can have a disaster but still win. And the other way around as well, you can play amazing and still lose. And of course you can also do that in tennis, but I think, again, as you get more mature, if I came off from a match and I played very well and lost, I wouldn't be happy, but I could take it a bit easier. But ultimately that accountability was with me. Not me looking around a dressing room thinking, and that's not me saying I could have gone and played professional football. I was far from that. But tennis, yes, one, I saw more of a career in tennis for myself because I was better at tennis than I was at football. But also, it's just that accountability, that individual accountability that I liked at the time of it. But there were some times in tennis where I thought, wow, I'd really want a team behind me now. Yeah. There was a lot of lonely times as well, yeah.
That's all my questions.
Okay, brilliant, yeah.
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Really busy. I tried to get you on a few weeks ago and you said you were really busy.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, and good luck. I hope it all goes well.
Thank you.
Thank you.